Ridgefield Cabin by the Prowler. There's an old cabin nestled in the foothills of Ridgefield, Connecticut, a very old cabin. Its origins date back to just before the start of the Revolutionary War. It's preserved and maintained as best as it can be by the Ridgefield Historical Society, and if you believe in rumors and superstition, it is said to be haunted as well. Countless paranormal investigators and so-called ghost hunting teams have been in and out of the historical cabin, all claiming encounters of paranormal activity. There was, however, one team that went to investigate the cabin and was never heard from again: the Paranormal Society. The group, who had a steadily growing, albeit slowly, YouTube channel where they would travel up and down the eastern coast of the United States, investigating haunted locations and buildings, and next on their list was the historic Ridgefield Cabin. The group was there to investigate and do a detailed story on the cabin's most infamous ghost, the reason why many people believe the location to be haunted. I am, of course, speaking of an incident that happened to Captain Nathaniel Tuckett and his small group of Continental soldiers during the Revolutionary War. The short version of the story is after the Americans' defeat at the Battle of Ridgefield, Captain Nathaniel and his men were separated from the rest of the army during the retreat. They found refuge at an abandoned cabin not far from the battlefield and hoped to rest for a bit before pressing on and linking back up with the rest of the army. Unknown to the captain and his men, they were tracked down by a contingent of British soldiers, and while Captain Tuckett and his men were inside resting, the cabin became surrounded and they were unknowingly trapped. It is said that redcoats burst through the door and savagely murdered Captain Nathaniel and his men, offering no quarter. They were found a week later by a fur trapper and his son. They were hung upside down from the ceiling, ropes around their ankles, their stomachs had been sliced open, and their entrails splattered the ground. Since then, the cabin was believed to be haunted, and many strange occurrences have been reported on the site, along with many disappearances as well. A few of the previous owners, a hunter or two, that never returned from their trip. Even an escaped prisoner who vanished, whose last reported whereabouts were in the vicinity. There have also been stories of more gruesome endings for people who wonder about the grounds of the haunted cabin and go inside its haunted interior. It is said some people meet the same fate as the captain and his men, and are found upside down with their entrails strewn on the floor. That is, in fact, the rumor of what happened to the Paranormal Society. There's a particular interesting rumor that the group was found exactly like that, and the local authorities cleaned up the scene and any evidence of carnage or any trace they were even there, fearing the unwanted publicity the town would attract from such a heinous scene. That's believed to be part of the job for the local sheriff, that's not talked about officially, but is handed down through each administration, cleaning up the messes at the old Ridgefield Cabin. Is that what happened to the paranormal group? Are they now part of the haunted history of the old historical cabin? Do they now haunt its grounds? All questions that can be answered if you're brave enough to be the next to investigate. They came to keep me company. Anonymous author. The scariest thing to ever happen to me happened when I was 13. I lived in a rural part of Connecticut near the Connecticut River. Our house, which had been built in the 1970s, was one of those uber modern deals with plenty of big windows and a big back deck. It was about a mile from the main road, a 2-lane country highway, and was surrounded by dense forest. My dad worked for a sports company. One of his colleagues at the time was a guy named Vince Russo, so put 2 and 2 together. And he was out of town a lot. When I was younger, he would take me, my mom, and my older brother with him. In 1995, my brother left for college, and it was just me at home. I was 11 and mature, so they tried leaving me on my own for short periods. Date night. Don't get a sitter. He's old enough. By the time I was 13, Mom and Dad were leaving me home for up to a week at a time, which was fine by me. I got to play Sega, order pizza, and play man of the house. Win-win. Anyway, my mom and dad were in Tulsa, Oklahoma that week. I was home alone. It was summer, so I didn't have to worry about school. I could stay up all night and sleep all day, and no one would bother me about it. They had been gone for 3 days, and I was loving it. That day I swam in the river, biked over to my friend's house, and spent the rest of the afternoon messing around in the woods behind his house. I left at dusk and got home just as the last bit of light drained from the day. I ate some leftover pizza and fired up my Genesis. I was just getting lost in the game when a knock sounded through the house. I don't know how many of you are latchkey kids, but those of you who are know what it's like when you're home alone and someone knocks on the door. Scary. It came again, and my blood ran cold. I muted the TV and listened. Images of burglars and child molesters running through my head. The knock came yet again, and I don't know why, but I found myself getting up, my heart pounding. I crept through the kitchen, which adjoined the living room, and into the front hall. The door was heavy and glassless. My mother, who was from the city, was kind of paranoid about living out in the middle of nowhere, so she made my dad install one of those fisheye peepholes that you usually see in apartment buildings. For whatever reason, I went to the door. I stood on my tippy toes. I looked through the glass. My heart stopped. My grandmother was standing on the stoop. The porch light wasn't on, so I couldn't see her face, but I recognized her outline. The stooped shoulders, the frizzy hair. She had been dead for 2 years. "Jamie," she said then, her voice rusty and dull. "Jamie, let me in." She knocked on the door again, and I flinched, my breath suddenly coming in ragged gasps. "Jamie, let me in." "Let us in," my Uncle David said. He'd been dead less than a year. Motorcycle accident on I-95. His body was so banged up we couldn't have an open casket funeral. "Jamie," Grandma said, "I want to see you. It's been so long." Either she or Uncle David slammed into the door then, and it shook in its frame. I crumpled to the floor. I couldn't move. I was petrified. "Your little brother's with us." My mom miscarried when I was 7. She was in the 2nd trimester. It was a boy, and his name was Alex. "We're all out here," Uncle David said. "Everyone you've ever known who's died. We came to keep you company." Alex, I assume, wailed then, a high, eerie, alien sound. I got up and ran then, into my parents' room, into their closet. I was there all night, and all night I could hear them out there banging on doors and windows, asking to be let in. When morning came, I gathered enough courage to call my mom and dad. I was hysterical. They came back on the next flight. I told them what had happened, and they didn't believe me. Of course they didn't. 2 days later, my mom was in her garden when she saw something in the woods. It was pink and fluttery. It was a dress my grandmother was buried in. You have to answer the door. Deleted author. There appears to be a legal mandate to answer the door where I live. I was never given a reason, but it was mentioned in passing by the community staff during the day that I signed my lease. I didn't think much of it. It's not often that I get guests anyway. Not because of the intermittent quarantines of the past few years, or anything like that. No, I just don't have many friends. In fact, I moved halfway across the country to get away from my family and my old life in Connecticut. I intentionally moved away to a town where no one knew me so that I wouldn't be obligated to interact with anyone, which is why it was really jarring for me to hear my doorbell ring on a Friday afternoon. My car was in the garage, and all of my blinds were drawn, so I wasn't worried about the person being able to tell I was home. I looked into the peephole. It was a teenage boy with round gold-rimmed glasses and strawberry blonde hair, holding a clipboard. Great. A solicitor, probably. He rang the doorbell one more time. I groaned and paced around for a few minutes, hoping he would leave. Eventually, I checked the peephole again. He was no longer at my door, but at my neighbor's across the way. She had opened the door and was speaking to him. I could hear their muffled conversation. He wanted her to sign up for something, and she said she was busy. He apologized and left. A little irritated that solicitors were bothering tenants of my private neighborhood, I took to the online forum set up for the residents. Clicking on the complaint sub-forum, I created a post. Hello, residents and staff. Has anyone else had solicitors come to their door? Had one come up to mine just this past hour. I thought this was supposed to be a gated complex. I saw him bothering my neighbor, too, after he gave up on me ever opening the door. Thanks, Sam. With that, I got up from my computer and took a nap. Around 45 minutes later, I woke up to my doorbell once again ringing, followed immediately by stern knocking. I groaned and looked at my phone. I had a notification that someone had replied to my residential forum post. The knocking continued, more aggressively. I put on my glasses. The doorbell was being jammed. The knocking turned into banging. I told you, you have to answer the door. The post read. Unexplained incident in New Haven. Deleted author. Greetings, everyone. My name is Dwayne. I'm a state trooper out of New Haven, Connecticut. I've been on the force for almost 20 years, and a few months back, something strange happened that I've not been able to shake. I've always been a bit of a drinker, but ever since that night, things have been bad. I've been irritable, out of sorts, and frankly drinking through each day. I'm hoping that maybe sharing this with someone will help. I can only imagine what my ex would say, so I'm turning towards the anonymous internet instead. It was a fair day, and I was cruising down 95, heading back to the station, when I got the call. Young woman causing a scene, crossing Interstate 95. This was the entirety of the report. I called in to get the mile marker and found that I was relatively close. I had been in a hurry to get off of work to see my daughter, But frankly, the idea of seeing her mother was enough to encourage me to respond. I called in that I was on my way and headed toward the reported scene. This internet age is crazy. Before I even reached the location, I was watching a YouTube video of a young girl running and spinning in circles in the middle of the highway. Sammy at dispatch had texted the link partially, so I would know what was happening, but mostly because Sammy was a bored busybody who loved gossip and glamorization. Regardless, by the time I reached the scene, I immediately recognized her. She was hard to miss. She was half naked, with the rags of a white camisole as her only protection against the elements. She was crouched with her shoulder pressed alongside the concrete barrier and frantically peeking over and then ducking back down. I positioned my car to protect her from the flow of traffic and called in my position. I carefully got out of the car and approached her gently as I could. I had spent years of dealing with domestic disputes, which more than not included some paranoid, drug-addled husband. The state of this woman looked very familiar, and I knew not to provoke someone as high as she must have been. She saw me coming from long off and locked eyes with mine as I step by step got closer. I held my hands low, palms down, showing that I was not a threat. I was good at this, and it worked. She let me get within speaking distance without becoming startled, though her eyes were wild and full of trepidation. "Sweetheart, I'm here to help you." She ignored me, instead popping her head up and looking over the barrier to the opposite side of the highway. I looked but saw nothing. "You're in danger, young lady." She spun her head to eyeball me intensely. "Yes," she whispered forcefully. "Okay, well, let me help you. Get into the car and we'll leave." I walked towards the car, looking over my shoulder to see her positioning and preparing to follow me like a cat. The moment my door was open, she darted from her position and was in the back seat of my cruiser faster than I would have imagined possible. I pulled away and headed back to the station, all the while looking at her in the rearview mirror. She was cut, bruised, scraped, and clearly not well. She kept darting from one window to another looking for something. "You're gonna be okay now. Can you tell me what happened?" "They're coming." She was distracted, still on the lookout. "Did someone hurt you? Are they here?" I slowed the car a bit in case the perp was in the local vicinity. She did not answer, yet her answer was clear. She was obviously worried about being found by the people who hurt her. I called into dispatch telling them that I had secured the girl and that I was on my way back now. She completely flipped out. She started kicking the seat behind me, spinning her body and screaming. "No! No! They'll hear! They'll find us!" Tears were streaming down her cheeks. "Shh! It's okay. You're safe with me. They won't be able to hurt you." "Do they have a police scanner? Is that what you mean?" I was now starting to realize that this girl might not be crazed or drugged. Her eyes were clear, and although highly disturbed, she did not seem to have the classic signs of a tweaker. "They will hear." She lowered her voice, looking into my eyes in the mirror. Okay. No more radio. We'll get you back to the station." She calmed a bit and fumbled with her hands between her knees. We only had a few minutes left until we reached the station, and the detectives would take over. My curiosity got the better of me, and I continued to ask questions. I knew that this was perhaps my only chance to actually figure out what had happened. And frankly, the idea of tracking down the scum that hurt this young girl was exciting. Who did this? Do you know where they are? Elsewhere. They took me. They took me long ago. And it's different. That place. They found me and they're looking again. To take me back. To take me. She was slow and despondent now. What does it look like, this place? It's bad and purple. It comes in waves, but they hurt. They pull at you, tearing. And the flashes, they pull too, but your brain, your eyes. This was getting nowhere fast. I decided that I was not likely to get any legitimate information at this point and stopped. My silence was interrupted by her fresh screams. She held her temples with the palms of her hands, fingers extended, shouting, "They're here now! They found me!" Over her deranged shouting, I heard the break of my radio and answered it.
Car 19, this is dispatch. What's your location?
This was so routine as to be automatic for me. I looked out the driver's side window to check and replied instantly. Mile marker 36. Then something stuck me. Sammy? Silence. Sammy, is that you? I got nothing in return. Hello? Silence. And then it was too silent. I looked in my rear view to nothing but an empty seat. I jammed my brakes and pulled to the breakdown lane and ran out of the car. I checked the back thoroughly to find nothing. No one. She was just gone. There was no sign she'd even been there. I came back to the station empty-handed. I was questioned about what was going on. I told them the truth. I told them every single part of what I'm telling you. What I got in return was a 3-week leave, and to never be looked at without concern again. I still have my career, but no one on the force treats me the same. I don't treat myself the same. I learned on that day that there was something enormous and unexplained among us. I was no threat to it, probably not even a consideration compared to that. But that exists. My reality is theirs. They are here, and there is nothing I can do about it. I just pray that they never want me. The Ordinary People, anonymous author. I've been a librarian in a small town in Connecticut for 43 years now. I'm an old man by now, but I took over for Mr. Werner after he passed away. He taught me everything I needed to know about running the library and much, much more. For example, the books to make sure nobody checks out, and the people to watch out for who come into the library. Ordinary people looking for a book. My first encounter with one of the ordinary people occurred only 2 weeks into me running the library on my own. I can still recall there being only 3 people who entered the library, silently scattered and wandering around different sections looking for something interesting to read, when I noticed a 4th person, not browsing, but searching. An ordinary person, with their right hand shoved deep back behind one of the shelves. I could hear them grunting from the strain they were putting on their arms trying to reach behind the bookshelf. I raised my voice as I walked at a brisk pace towards them, asking what they were doing, or if they dropped something back there and needed some help. No, I can't reach it. Gosh darn it, I just can't reach it. the ordinary person shouted, echoing through the entire library as they walked quickly towards the front door and out into the cold winter weather. I never saw their face, but I saw enough of the shape of their body, hair color, and clothing to recognize them if I saw them again. 3 years later, as I was closing up the library for the night, I was just about to lock up the door and leave when I caught the outline of a person illuminated by one of the front entrance lights in that same spot. They were down on their knees, clawing at the bookshelf, trying to get back behind there. This time, I switched back on the lights and ran towards them as I got close. This ordinary person screamed so loud that I shut my eyes and plugged my ears from the pain. They were out of the door by the time I noticed that they had already made it to the front door. I looked at the bookshelf, and it was covered in deep claw marks, colored red from the blood as their fingernails had torn off in their attempt. Nothing happened for a long time, and I was thankful for that. I had actually forgotten about the ordinary people until tonight, as I typed this at my front desk. The library has been closed for 3 days for the holidays, but I came in to grab some books to read, and that's when I saw them. This ordinary person found what others had failed to do so for almost a century. I've never heard such horrific sounds of joy in my life. Curse of the Funeral Flowers. Deleted author. Before I go into the curse itself, I'll give a little background on where it may have came from. The property my house was built on in Connecticut once had a huge garden of flowers that were used for all of our town's events. Flowers for weddings, flowers for ceremonies, and flowers for funerals. Lilies, orchids, and the most unique, the black carnation. It's a beautiful flower that locals deem was a result of selective breeding, the same way kale had been bred into cauliflower, broccoli, etc. Back in the late 1700s, a Revolutionary warship captain named Stephen Stowe cared for 54 smallpox-infected war prisoners in a small building on the property used as a hospital before dying from the disease himself. He was carried to the graveyard with his casket bearing one black carnation. In the 1860s, a Civil War widow named Heather Gladshire received a $100 check from the U.S. government from the death of her husband, which she used to dismantle the building and construct the house that we now own today. It's one of the oldest buildings in our town. At the end of our backyard is a tall concrete wall, smothered with ivy. That wall was part of a massive greenhouse which Heather used to grow the same flowers that had been on the property for nearly 100 years. Another home at the end of our street was the town's funeral home. Back then, when a person passed away, their body was carried to the funeral home at the end of the street, bearing a bouquet of flowers from Heather's greenhouse, topped with one black carnation. They didn't grow anywhere else in town naturally. Though a bit morbid to think about, these mysterious black carnations were beautiful, and my sister and I loved picking and saving them. Now, it never felt like a haunted house. There's no strange noises, doors slamming, voices, flying books, none of that. It's a rickety old house with plenty of deaths over the last couple of 100 years, but nothing out of the ordinary ever happens, except for this thing about the flowers. Years ago, when one of us would get sick, the flowers would start to bloom in the yard. The sicker we got, the more they would appear. As we got better, they would wither and die. This went on for years, and my sister named it The Curse of the Funeral Flowers, a title my parents were completely not thrilled with, and asked us not to talk about it. It seemed pretty harmless, but not something our family wanted getting out. It's a small town, and the locals like to gossip. Something like that would mark our family as a bunch of weirdos in town. Then came the smell. It began one day my aunt had caught pneumonia. When we went to visit her in Maryland, she spotted a black carnation growing in her yard, which hadn't been there earlier that day. It was the first time we had ever seen one grow outside of our home, and it certainly wasn't the last. Over the years, when a friend or family member became ill, we would often find a black carnation growing somewhere on their property also. It came to us that we must have inherited some sort of stigma from living in that house. One day, the aroma of the flowers suddenly filled the house. The smell was overwhelming, as if someone smashed a bottle of perfume right underneath our noses. Later that night, we got a call from my uncle. His illness took a turn for the worse, and he wasn't going to live very long. A few months after, the same scent filled our home just a day before my great-grandfather passed away. About 2 years later, when my sister moved off to college, she claimed her entire dorm reeked of the flowers the night a girl in her hall accidentally overdosed. And about 4 years ago, while my parents were on vacation in Antigua, my mother said the aroma filled their cabin. During the day, she learned her closest friend was terminally ill. He passed away that weekend, before they even got back. This odd mark of black carnations became a sign to us that someone very close was going to die. There was no telling who, where they would be, when it would happen, or how. Just an ominous smell that would warn us a week, a day, or just an hour before it happened. As we all got older, the flowers would stop appearing. They quit growing in the yard. We didn't see them when we were sick, and we wouldn't see them at friends' and families' homes. We thought we beat the curse. Then last week, it happened. My boyfriend was helping me move a couch into my room on the second floor. He lost his balance and fell over the railing, head first. He fell unconscious immediately. His head had split open and he was bleeding everywhere. I tried talking to him, but he wouldn't respond. As the overwhelming scent of the flower began to fill the room, I freaked out and called 911. It seemed as if the smell got stronger at every passing minute, and every minute felt like an hour. Finally, the ambulance arrived and rushed him off to the hospital. He was in critical condition. I followed the ambulance to the hospital. I began to cry as the tainted smell of flowers overcame me. The smell followed me, convinced me that he wasn't going to live. I sat in the hospital, staring at my knees, crying. I was so upset that I didn't even notice the smell anymore, or the fact that it had completely vanished. 20 hours go by, and I've gotten no sleep. A nurse came in to tell me that he was stable, but unconscious, but I could visit him. I pulled a chair up to the bed and slept the rest of the night with him. I woke up in the morning to the fresh scent of, you guessed it, flowers. My boyfriend was still sleeping. I looked up and saw a beautiful bouquet of assorted flowers from the hospital florist on the table. Different kinds, too. Some of them I didn't even recognize. There was no card. When I got up and asked the nurse about them, she said she hadn't even seen anyone enter the room with them. When I went back into the room, I took a look through the bouquet, and among all the roses, gladiolas, daffodils, and tulips was one black carnation. Took a bet to spend the night at the cemetery. Seriously freaked right now. Should I leave? Leaving is barely an option. I'd rather not discuss the specifics, but it's very important to me that I win this bet, which means getting through this night. Right now, it's 1:14 a.m. Eastern Time in a part of Connecticut that I'm very unfamiliar with. I'm in Fairfield. It's the county over from me. I'm pretty sure the town is Easton. Could be wrong, but East is definitely in the name. Either way, it's a cemetery that's especially scary, according to my friend who made the bet. That's why we drove 40 minutes to get here. I explained I would do it. No problem. I'm not scared. I don't believe in ghosts. Yada yada yada. Now, I'm freaking out. I got dropped off at 11 p.m. I have to stay until 6 a.m. I have to take iPhone video and Snapchat updates every 90 minutes as proof. Besides my phone, I brought a sleeping bag, plenty of water, a blunt, 6-pack of Smirnoff Ice, and a bag of almonds. Not sure if that matters. My phone is what I am typing all this on. Thank God I can get service here. Things were fine the first couple of hours. I was just drinking and texting some friends. Got here with a fully charged phone. About half an hour ago, I felt a breeze pick up. I know it has nothing to do with it, but I instantly felt creeped out. I began scanning the area but saw nothing. I was feeling anxious and thought smoking the blunt would help. It didn't at all. I was a little buzzed, that's for sure, but I'm so certain that I saw something. Shit, I really should explain the layout of where I am first. The whole graveyard is just a grid layout. When you enter, half of the graveyard is to your left, the other half to the right. The left side is at a slight incline. Straight ahead is a large Holy Mary statue, which seems to be the center of the entire property. When I walked in, I went straight, past the statue, to the end of the far side. There was a bench, and that's where I sat, spending my first few hours. Sitting on this bench, I was facing towards the statue. Feeling even more paranoid after smoking, I went back to my phone in an attempt to distract myself. Every couple of seconds, I looked up and scanned the area. When I first saw something, I didn't know what else to call it, but something. My heart skipped a beat as I took a quick double take. Easily the most panicked reaction I've ever witnessed take hold of my body. Before I knew it, it was gone. It was a figure, some sort of human figure. I have no idea, male or female. It was in the distance a bit. I may be freaking out, I don't know, but I'm pretty fucking sure I saw something. Like I know people freak out, so I'm trying to convince myself I'm one of them, but it really, really looked like it was there. Panicked as hell, I grabbed my things without even thinking and headed towards the side of the graveyard, not at the incline. I was beginning to settle down, barely, before I looked back towards where I was. My eyes drifted towards the statue, and now I see 2 red eyes coming from a bush about 50 yards away. I'm 100% positive I see red eyes, or at least lights, in those bushes. I'm staring at them now. every so often they blink, or hopefully just flash if there's some sort of light. Right now, I'm debating going over to see if it's some sort of light. I know it has to be, but that figure I saw is really freaking me out. Whoever I saw could be hiding in the bushes, but they wouldn't have red eyes, which makes me think it's something crazy like a ghost. I have no idea what to do, deciding between running and getting picked up. Friend has their ringer on if I need to forfeit the bet, or check out the red lights. I wish I could show you why they look like eyes. I know my phone won't pick up a good picture, and I'm pretty scared to use the flashlight now. Any suggestions? If nothing else, any company, maybe? I'm literally shaking right now. I went back to the bench to take pictures of how creepy it was. Ended up with creepiest picture I ever saw. I'm going to post it in a minute. Currently hyperventilating. After that picture, I went closer to get a better shot and freaked out when I saw the result. I took 2 more quick ones before sprinting away. Please, someone, give me a rational excuse for this. I'm freaking out right now. For those saying to call my friend to see if it's him messing with me, I did give him a call. It's not him. I checked the Find My Friends app, and he's at his house right now. I told him I might be bailing. The part that makes this so scary for me is I'm so far away from civilization. We drove about half a mile down a rural road with no house to get to the entrance. The cemetery is basically abandoned. Graves are from 100 years ago or so. It's 3:12 a.m. The eyes have reappeared in a bush about 10 feet away from me. I know they're eyes. I'm going to walk towards it and hope it's an animal that runs away. On the off chance that people are still following this, I made it through the night safely, all the way to 6 a.m., where my friend picked me up as promised. As many of you guessed, my phone did die on me. It was an incredibly freaky night that I will have to expand on later. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness.27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.